Welcome to Ruth Asawa and Kei Sekimachi and their remarkable innovations, a conversation with Gyöngy Laky, Melissa Leventon, D'Alessandro and Tom Grotta. And I'm very delighted to have the program kick off with my dear friend and mentor, Gyöngy Laky, the founder of Fiberworks Center for the Textile Arts.
This is Juneteenth. Juneteenth is a federal holiday commemorating when the very last enslaved people in the United States in Texas found out that they were indeed free. We have today the opportunity to remember that we have gone through some very bad times in the past. Another very bad time was the Second World War. I was born in 1944 in the middle of it in Hungary. And here in the United States, another terrible thing happened during that time. In 1942, there was an executive order putting up to 120,000 people of Japanese descent in internment camps in various parts of this country. However, it was the beginning of nurturing, or maybe not the beginning, but it nurtured these two artists as young people because both of their families, the Sekimachis and the Asawas, were interned. So let's jump ahead to a happier time. In 1972, Kay married Bob Stocksdale, wood artist. I had just come back from postgraduate study through University of California in Berkeley in India. And when I came back, I found that wonderful exhibition, Deliberate Entanglements, in San Francisco. You see here Nobori, Kay's magnificent multi-layered monofilament sculpture. I had been very interested in exploring double weave, layered weaving with Ed Rosbach at UC Berkeley as a student. I had no idea one could do this with that method. A really brilliant bit of engineering. On the right, you see a page out of the book about the Lausanne, Switzerland, very prestigious Biennale exhibitions. In 1973, Kay's piece, Nobori, was exhibited there. Also in 1973, I was able to open the doors of Fiberworks with the help of many wonderful friends. Soon after, Tom and I got to know both Kay and Bob quite well, and also Ruth Asawa and her husband. It turned out that in early 1974, we were living just 3 blocks from Bob and Kay. This is their home. They both had studios there. You see on the left, the lower window looking right into Bob's workshop. We had some wonderful visits with Bob and Kay, speaking about many things of mutual interest. Turns out Bob had been a conscientious objector during the Second World War. And of course, there was lots to talk about in terms of the incarceration in the internment camps. But we also talked about art and art activism. We had some wonderful conversations. My husband, Tom Layton, had been the president of the Gerbode Foundation for almost 40 years. He was deeply interested in what had happened to people of Japanese descent here and the internment camps. The foundation ended up funding a number of films, one shown on PBS and one was shown in Congress. The foundation was also very interested in supporting efforts to increase the acknowledgement and litigation to help promote interest in reparations. But now let's go back to India. In India, I collected a number of textiles, and among my favorites, you'll be surprised to hear, was animal accoutrements. Here, I'm looking at a very colorful, lengthy camel girth that I hung up in Fiberworks, and it caught the attention of many artists in the area. I don't know when Kay started working with split ply plating. She did wonderful works in that technique. Again, amazing how she understood what she could engineer with a given technique and made some wonderful sculptures. You'll see some of them later on. Kay was on occasion directly involved in Fiberworks, and I know in 1980 she juried the Textile Expressions exhibition. Now, those were very important exhibitions because it offered artists in the area an opportunity to show new work. And this one, the theme was books and pages. Speaking of books and pages, last year, Yoshiko Wada organized a wonderful event and exhibition asking artist friends and admirers of Kay to give small objects to Kay, 98 of them. It was her 98th birthday. And I gave this a tiny little, probably that book is about 1 inch by 1 inch, called Japan Book, 1980. And it was made by Susan Wick. Each page has one of her wonderful drawings. To learn more about Bob and Kay, you can look up the Bancroft Library's Oral History Project. There's a fiber art series at the Bancroft, and they are both interviewed. Both Kay and Ruth were very, very interested in education, and you'll hear more about that later as well. Both of them, in 1982, had exhibitions funded by the National Endowment for the Arts at Fiberworks. Ruth's interest in education led to her starting a project called the Alvarado Arts Workshop. Now, it became eventually Ruth Asawa School of the Arts. And I found a wonderful quote there. Art is doing. Art deals directly with life. Visiting the exhibition here at SF MoMA, we did feel that deeply. As Tom and I visited the exhibit, we began to realize, gee, we have a couple of little drawings that Ruth made for us. And so here you'll see Happy Birthday, Tom. This was actually in 1982, year of that exhibit. And this, a few years later, after lunch together, wishing us a happy trip to Paris, which it was. I was intrigued in my many visits to the exhibit to look at more of the scope and span and variety in what Ruth Asawa was doing. I became very interested in her drawings. I had always loved the sculptures. You'll see that fabulous one on the left. But I started seeing the relationship between the two. Ruth had studied in 1946 at the Black Mountain College. That's also where she met her wonderful husband, architect Albert Lanier. One of her drawing professors there was the first one to put together her wire sculptures and say that she was actually drawing in space. She had begun these looped wire pieces after a trip to Mexico where she got interested in some basketry techniques. This is a fabulous portrait by Imogen Cunningham, which will greet you as you go to the museum, and I hope you all have a chance to do that. By the way, I should just add that Ruth married Albert in 1949 in San Francisco. They moved there then. Interracial marriages were not permitted. They were illegal in many parts of our country. Just another thing that we experienced as the United States developed. Their partnership started then, lasted 59 years. So it was a very good partnership, as was Kay's and Bob's. She actually showed some work at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. That was, I think, when she was in her early 20s, soon after coming to the Bay Area. And as I moved into the exhibit, which I visited many times, I found another great quote. An artist is an ordinary person who can take ordinary things and make them special. And make them special she did, over and over again, as you'll see when you view her work. She took simple shapes sometimes, and by putting simple shapes together, made very complex, wonderful sculptures. Here you'll see a few more. The ones on the right intrigue me. That's a tiny little piece, and it looks like an animated insect or small animal. I love this. You'll see one of the very large pieces in the exhibit as it was hung in her living room here in San Francisco. You'll also see something that pleased me enormously. All the young people in the exhibit. I went several times, as I mentioned, and each time there were many people there, but many, many young people, many admirers. So I was also intrigued by the many different ways that Ruth worked. I tended to focus on her wire sculptures, but she used patinated bronze. She explored galvanizing. She explored electroplating. And of course, many of us know Andrea, her sculpture at Ghirardelli Square. In 1965, my parents opened a gallery in Ghirardelli Square to show Chinese paintings. So when this was installed in 1968, I was a student at UC Berkeley, and I ran right over to take a look. She did a number of commissions, and you'll see more, but this one I love, one of the medallion-style pieces of hers, very large, welcoming visitors to the Oakland Museum of California. Tree-related pieces like this one were evidently early works. That is a very big bundle of wire, and as she explored taking the wire pieces and opening them, she was able to create more and more branches. Just a really interesting bit of engineering. And you'll see in this drawing how her drawings continue to relate. And it seems like her sculptures and drawings talk to each other. And I was fascinated by seeing the relationships. And again, her extremely wonderful drawings. She loved nature, loved gardening. And also you will see some of Ruth's work on, I think it's on permanent display at the De Young Museum. And here, an excellent photo by Tom Grotta, who will be speaking to you later. This was Woven Histories. It was interesting to me when the Woven Histories exhibit of textiles moved to New York, MoMA, that there was an article I have to read to you. The title is wonderful. It was in the May issue of Art News. Fiber art has officially taken over New York's museums and galleries. And it starts with this. These days, seemingly everywhere you turn in New York, there are weavings. In San Francisco's MoMA exhibition of Asawa's work, it is mentioned in the second paragraph, which begins, fiber art's ascent has been brewing for the past couple decades. However, we all know it was brewing far longer than that. Thank you very much.
It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce Melissa Leventon, who was formerly the curator in charge of textiles at the Fine Arts. We have two of those amazing people on this call. She's also the founding partner of Curatrix Group. She can tell you about that. And she has been teaching for a mere 27 years at my alma mater, CCA or CCAC, as some of us remember. So without further ado, Melissa, over to you.
Thank you, Julie. And I note that CCAC is also Kay's alma mater. And just a quick plug for the exhibition at SF MoMA, which I saw at the beginning of this week and is wonderful. But another plug also for 3 exhibitions that are currently running at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. First and foremost among them, Sekimachi, Ingenuity and Imagination, which I curated, and along with an exhibition of Virginia Davis's work. Virginia and Kay were friends, and there are a lot of correspondences between the two of them. And my colleague Joyce Hulbert curated an exhibition, a museum collection survey, which looks at the work of many of Kay's cohort of fiber artists in the Bay Area, including people like Catherine Westphal and Mark Adams. So 3 wonderful exhibitions. They are running all summer. Please come down and see them. They're there through September 7th. And the Sekimachi exhibition is drawn overwhelmingly from Forrest Merrill's extensive collection. So I wanted to thank him for his generosity in lending us so many of the pieces that otherwise might be gracing his home. And I was especially delighted to discover how many of Kay's early work that Forrest has. I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in an exhibition at the Mingei Museum about 13 or 14 years ago called In the Realm of Nature that was curated by Signe Mayfield. And it gave me the privilege of spending quite a lot of time with Kay at her home and studio, talking to her about her work, looking at a lot of her work. And many of those pieces that are now in our exhibition, I first saw in Kay's home. So it's lovely to see them in a museum context as well. And most of you have probably heard her famous story about first becoming entranced by watching student weavers at work when she was studying at CCAC. And that was in 1949. Kay at the time was not studying textiles or weaving. She was studying watercolors, she was studying design, she was studying screen printing, but she happened to visit the weaving studio and she was captivated by the actual motions of weaving that she saw her fellow students doing. And so she ran right out and she blew her entire savings on a 4-harness loom. That cost $150 in 1949. And what I often do with my students is that I run it through an inflation calculator. And so I can tell you that in 2025 dollars, that loom cost Kay $2,030.35. It was a lot of money. for somebody to spend on this in 1949. It was a considerable investment for her. But of course, she didn't know how to weave. And so her next challenge was learning how to use the loom. She found her way to free classes at Berkeley Adult School to learn some of the basics, and she got enough to allow her to weave small, saleable things like placemats and towels. She learned more from other weavers in the East Bay. She joined several of the local weavers guilds, and she started to exhibit at shows around town. So this is actually a shot of an early exhibition that Kay participated in at the De Young Museum, of all places, in the 1950s. I don't know exactly which year, but Kay wove the upholstery fabric on the sofa and on the chair. And one of her colleagues, Claire Weaver, wove the casement that you see hanging on the left. Okay. So these were the kinds of things that she was doing at that time, and so far so good. But finally, in 1954, Kay had the opportunity to take a summer weaving class at CCAC with Trude Germonprez, whom you see at the loom in the center, along with Kay on the right looking on. And it was once Kay got into Trude's class that she finally started to understand in a really systematic way what she was actually doing at the loom. Trude, as I'm sure many, if not most of you know, had studied with Bauhausler and Albers at Black Mountain College and Benita Otto when she was still back in Europe. And Trude followed Bauhaus philosophy in her own teaching. And that yoked the experimental attitude of modernism with an emphasis on the weaver's mastery of tools and equipment. And so there is essentially a through line between the Bauhaus and Kay being the second generation of artists to learn from either Bauhaus masters themselves or people who had been trained by the teachers at the Bauhaus. And this approach was exactly what she was looking for. It was the right approach for her at the right time, and it changed her life, and it changed her work. So this is a sample that Kay wove in Trude's class, 1954-55. And I think you can see the enormous difference between the sophistication of this textile in its coloration and its structure and the placemats I showed you a couple of slides ago, which Kay had been doing only a couple of years earlier. And Trude's class also helped Kay to realize that she didn't have to confine herself as a weaver to utilitarian objects like placemats or curtains, or fabric for aprons. So I think it's fair to say that these two short summer sessions, just a couple of months each at CCAC, set Kay on the path to becoming the fiber artist that she became. So from there, from the mid-50s, Kay went on to study with others. She had a formative session at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in 1956, where she studied with Marley Ernan, another Bauhausler, and also Jack Lenner Larson. But Trude remained her most important mentor. And you can see Trude's influence on Kay's work in all sorts of ways. So in tapestry, for instance, you've got Trude on the left and Kay on the right. And Trude opted for a balanced weave structure for this tapestry and many of her others, and that allowed the warp to show. As a weaver, Trude was very interested in what the warp did. And traditional tapestry technique, as many of you know, packs the weft threads down so that they totally cover the warps. All you see of the warps are the ridges that then run either vertically or horizontally, which in traditional tapestry is usual, where it's turned 90 degrees when it comes off the loom. Trude's tapestry was not like that. And Kay did the same thing. You can see in her tapestry on the right. She added inlay or supplementary weft, and also overlay to achieve that same lighter and more textured effect that Trude's tapestries have. And Kay recalled seeing an early tapestry of Trude's that was so open in its weave that she could see through it. And clearly that stoked her own desire to explore transparency in textiles. So this example was inspired by fishnets that Kay saw drying on a pier in Maine, which is where she was when she attended that summer session at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. So you can see the looseness and transparency of the weave, and she experimented with the addition of fiberglass yarns to suggest rippling water. This piece is on display in San Jose, and you can just see little glints of the fiberglass yarn. Kay's interest in transparency also inspired a series of room dividers, which she wove between 1960 and 1963. So, in all honesty, room dividers were a hot commodity among California weavers at this period. You see a lot of them because they were envisioning them as essentially textiles for home architecture being used to demarcate the space in California modern open plan houses. I don't actually know how many of them ended up being used that way, but there were a lot of them around. For her room divider, Kay used a woven lace technique called Brooks Bouquet, in which a weft is wrapped around several adjacent warp ends to create small thread bundles. And I think you can see those pretty clearly in the divider that's in the foreground in the slide on the left. They leave kind of lace-like holes in the textile. It's very similar to lino weave, which is a technique that Kay loved. And in the example on the right, she added E-cut into the mix, and she meticulously shifted the warp threads to create the chevron pattern, which was extremely time-consuming. Because as you can see, even though E-cut does tend to leave you with slightly fuzzy edges, she shifted that warp meticulously, so it forms the diagonal of the chevrons pretty cleanly. But I think the most crucial thing that Truda did for Kay was to unravel the mystery of double weave, which is a technique, as again, I'm sure most of you know, that allows the weaver to weave a textile with 2 or more layers stacked on top of one another and joined in various ways or not, as the weaver desires. And Kay was fascinated by double weave. And it became her favorite technique. And once she really understood it, she began to incorporate it into her work on a regular basis. She used it in the fishnets I showed you a moment ago, and it was double weave that Kay used for the nylon monofilament hangings that were her breakout series. I love that quote that Gyöngy read about an artist being a person who takes ordinary things and makes them extraordinary. And I think that exactly epitomizes Kay's monofilament sculptures. These followed hard on the heels of the room dividers beginning in 1963. And Kay recalled in a number of conversations, both with me and with others, that she really wanted to do a wall hanging that was dimensional, perhaps with 1 or 3 transparent layers. And she started with a small sample by way of proof of concept, and she liked it. And then she determined that if she had the right material, she could weave a 3-dimensional form that would balloon out and hold its shape. And the right material turned out to be fishing line, the quintessential ordinary material that she turned into something extraordinary. A friend from her haystack class in 1956 had a mother who worked at DuPont, and the friend had given Kay some nylon monofilament, and she decided to use it. So that's what she experimented with, and you can see the result on the screen. I don't know if this is the first of the monofilaments, but it certainly was one of the first. It was woven in 1963, the year she started, and you can see that it's 3 layers. They get much more complex, up to 6 layers, as I'm sure you know. This is Ogawa 2. It's a 6-layer monofilament piece, and this is in the exhibition at San Jose. Signe Mayfield, who has written more about Kay than just about anybody I know, dates the beginning of Kay's artistic maturity to this monofilament series, and I would agree. Although quite a number of fiber artists, including Truda, including people like Lenore Tawney and Magdalena Bakanovic, had been experimenting in the same era with making very sculptural, three-dimensional pieces that would free hang in space. And by the way, that's exactly what Ruth Asawa was doing with her wire sculptures, although she started in the 1950s. Nobody was making anything quite like the monofilaments, at least nobody in the fiber sector. And they shot Kay to national and international recognition, and they cemented the importance of her artistic vision. And I'm sure that both Jill and Tom will be talking more about the development of that artistic vision in the 70s and 80s and 90s and the current millennium. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. That was incredibly wonderful. And thanks for your patience with my slide manipulation. We will be, as I said, doing some edits. And now it's my pleasure to introduce another incredible curator, Jill D'Alessandro, who is currently the director and curator of the Avenir Institute of Textile Arts and Fashion at the Denver Art Museum.
Okay, so I am going to speak very briefly. I think that between Melissa and Tom and Gyöngy, enough has been, there's not much for me to say. When Gyöngy told me about this, that there would be a section on Kay, I wanted to bring attention to an exhibition that I had worked on when I was, as Melissa's successor as curator in charge of textile arts and fashion at the Fine Arts Museums. And I think it's an important exhibition, not because I curated it, but because of the backstory. This exhibition was truly Kay's vision and Kay's decision to do. I had just been working with her to place a monofilament artwork into the Fine Arts Museum's collection, Kasura. And I asked Kay if she would be interested in doing an exhibition in the education gallery. And she said, yes, I would. She goes, but it is an education gallery, and I think the exhibition really needs to be about education. For a little bit of backstory, the New De Young opened in 2005, and there was a full textile gallery and an education gallery. And within the course of a decade, the education gallery started being repurposed for different things. It was overflow for main exhibitions, as well as I was doing small exhibitions in the space because the main gallery was being used for other purposes. And Kay let me know that she didn't think that was appropriate and that it was time to bring the education gallery back to being about education. So the concept, student, teacher, artist, the title and the concept was Kay's. And Kay, so I just wanted to sort of so that's why I think the project is so special, because it really was, I was just basically a facilitator for Kay's vision for the exhibition. When I asked Kay for a quote for the Fine Arts Museums, this is what she said. And so the exhibition had about 30 textiles, 30 artworks in it, but most of them were studies from our early pieces. And for those of you who know or don't know the gallery space, there's 32 drawers, study drawers, and we filled 28 of them with Kay's samples. And Kay's quote for the Fine Arts Museums magazine was, "Trudy led me to understand the loom through her disciplined sequence of assignments. This exhibition represents the first time showing of some of those pieces, which I later used in my own classes as a teacher. Sadly, educational sources for weaving have dwindled across the country. It is a fact that gives this greater importance to this exhibition." And so in 2016, Kay would have been 90 years old, and this is what she wanted the textile world to hear. So like Melissa, I worked with Kay in her home to review all these pieces. I'm showing you, there we are reviewing the pieces that would have gone into the study drawers. On the right is her fabric analysis of a Huichol bag. She also, with no surprise, that she had a lot of structural analysis of Peruvian double weaves. Like Annie Albers, again, the chasing the lineage of the double weave back to the Bauhaus, but they were also studying Peruvian textiles. And here are some of her sketches and analysis of weave structures. And one of the things I think is really spoken, which has really been spoken about Kay, is that she has this kind of simplicity and in complexity. She is able to create these incredibly complex weaves. But when you look at it, she is able to synthesize it into the most simple of analysis. And I think that's the beauty in her work. She also held on to everything, and that was really remarkable. And I don't know how many of you can read, but I really loved this. I had taken photos of her different notes as a student, and at one, and highlighted in yellow, she wrote, "The warp can become the weft," or "the weft can become the warp." And so we wrote a brochure, and I say we because, and this is really why I wanted to present today, is that actually Kay wrote the brochure. And for those of you who are interested in her work, I just think this little brochure is important because at 90 years old, I think it was the first time she had actually written her own text. And maybe somebody of you on the call can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Now, she'd been interviewed many times. She had already been interviewed for the Smithsonian Archives. But here you can see the different pieces. So Katsura was the monofilament piece that we worked on. And then we had one piece from Trude Gahrenport. I want to point out the piece right below Trudy's portrait photograph on all white was her final assignment for her class with Trudy. And then at the bottom is one of her assignments from Jacqueline. Well, both both those pieces that Melissa showed, but also beneath it was emotional stripes, which was one of her assignments for Jacqueline R. Larson. And then at the bottom, there was intellectual stripes and emotional stripes. I want to point out there was one of her ply split weaving pieces with Ginge was talking about when the camel hanging. And so she did get very interested in ply strip weaving. And then of course, Bob did the, he turned the wood that was for the piece. I also want to tell the story that Kay explained to me part of her interest in the ply split weaving is that she was a newlywed at the time. And that for those of you who know her house and her studio, that her studio was separate from Bob's studio. And both of them as artists and very dedicated artists would be in their studios all the time. And so she said what she really loved about the ply split weaving was that she could take her work into his studio and that they could spend time together that way. And that's this one side of the gallery of the piece. So you can see that there were all these study pieces. There were also a number of her jewelry at the that she was creating at the time. And I loved, being, overhearing a conversation that Kay was having with a visitor in the gallery, and she was each one of those jewelry pieces, which were like different braiding techniques, were different techniques. And somebody asked her about that. She goes, "Well, I just love exploring and trying new things." And she was saying this at 91 years old, 91 years of age. And these are really the only, well, aside from the jewelry, the only two, finished bodies of work. Everything else she was showing, and it was Kay's decision to show were her study pieces. Now I see that they're being framed and being shown, so here we see some of her working things. One of my favorite things in the study drawers, it was a circular study, and she had just read in the newspaper that they were making woven covers for missiles. And she wanted to figure out how how to weave in a circular pattern, and she still had that little study piece. So you can see her working mechanism and then the finished product on the right, and another study piece. But a study piece of Kay's is a masterpiece. And then because Yoshiko couldn't be present today, I wanted to show the photo. I shared this photo of Yoshiko and Kay. And the Bay Area is so fortunate to have to have such an amazing textile artist community. And I think at the core of it, this community and sharing of knowledge and support system is remarkable. That one that seems to be about community and bringing each other together is such the core. And I think people like Yoshiko and Ginge and Kay really bring that to the forefront. So thank you.
Jill, thank you so much. Wow, to see those study drawers, just really, really amazing. And thank you for acknowledging this amazing community too. So next up, we have Tom Grotta, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. He's the co-curator and founder of Brown Grotta Arts. And Brown Grotta Arts has done so much to really bring textiles to the fore. So Tom, I'm going to stop sharing, and luckily you get to run your own slides. And over to you if you are ready.
Okay, I guess thanks for including me. Well, we have a few less words. I'm more about pictures, which is a lot of the relationship with Kay. And this was from the last time I went to photograph her when she was working on some pieces. Let me just go to. We were able to visit Bob and Kay in 1991 when we were preparing an exhibition here in Connecticut. On the steps is many of the pieces that were actually in our exhibition. And Kay upstairs in her studio, which is immaculate. You could eat off the floor. More baskets that she had made for our exhibition. It was an interesting time because fiber was having one of its out periods. And as well and respected as Kay was within the fiber world, the rest of the world was not as aware. And at the time, we had never shown anything but fiber. And we thought, well, men love wood, so let's have a show of the two of them. And we couldn't get over when we actually had our exhibition, how many husbands came complaining how come their wives had never shown them Kay's work before when they got to see the Bob and Kay show together. We actually, the New York Times even wrote up the exhibition that we had, and it was, we produced a wonderful catalog. This was actually one of the spreads where she had her large columns, which she didn't let very many people install other than myself and the washi vessel on the left. Here's some of the patch pots that she had made for the exhibition. And here's some of her paper bowls. And the hornet's nest, which later we had found a beautiful hornet's nest at our house. And I was so excited to send it to her, hoping she'd make me one, but she said the hornet's nest was too beautiful. She wouldn't take it apart. So I was very disappointed. The breadth of her work is astonishing and too much for my presentation. I'm also not going to show you all my pictures since I have probably photographed over 170 of her works. Here's a shot from an exhibition at the San Francisco airport, which shows some of the earlier works. We had the opportunity to exhibit several bodies of her work, which we'll share here. This is the details in this chronology are ours, supplemented with information from Sydney's timeline at the Fresno catalog, Kay Sekimachi, Master Weaver, Innovations in Forms and Materials, which we still may have on our website if it's copies available. This was actually at the Fuller Museum. Perhaps Kay's most famous for, as you've already heard a lot about the monofilaments. What's interesting is recently we were able to get some of the earlier smaller monofilaments or more studies that she didn't want really to be available publicly before. And for the first time, we've sort of been able to show them. So we're very excited. Here's one that she had done in 68. This was a letter that she had with DuPont in 76, where they were discussing the flexibility and the durability of the fishing line at the time to see if it was a usable material for what she was going to do with it. There's a piece that you had seen before in other pictures in the presentation, but unlike most of the pictures photographed about fiber in that time period where it's all against a black background or a white background, one of the things that I tried to do when I showed Kay's work, it was always about how her work looked in space, and I thought you really needed to see it in space. So my pictures were a little different than the clinical ones that curators would love to show you. And these are details of several of the monofilaments we've had, white, black, green, from very small to very, very large. And here is another one of the pieces that we sold. We went to the Renwick exhibition to see Subversive Skills Sublime Fiber Art by Women at the Renwick in 2004. 24. The monofilaments were shown at the wall hangings at MoMA in 68, Objects USA in 69, delivered at Tagelbitz at UCLA in 71, and the Lucerne Bayanella, which we discussed earlier, at 73, and she's currently in Woven Histories at the National Gallery, and now currently at MoMA. Kay's work was remarkable and accomplishes right out of the box. She was studying painting at California College of Crafts. Actually, in 1949, Mariette Rousseau-Vermette, who's how we got started in the fiber world, went to work with and study with Dorothy Liebes, and that's where she met Kay, and later on, Mariette introduced us to Kay. Here are some of the earlier works of Kay's. You saw a single piece before, but these are for the framed Trudy Gumampre study weavings. The problem with when we started in the early 80s, we would show textiles just pinned to the wall, and the artists loved that, and artists could buy it that way, but we really wanted to bring this art to the public, and they sort of needed to see how important it was, and the framing has become a big thing, unfortunately for me later, which is something I don't really love to do, but I realize it's gotten our collectors to really appreciate the quality of this work, and work like this should be framed. Here's another early piece done in 1959. We talked about the Camel's Girth series, of which we have several, and we're hoping to actually have an exhibition at a New York gallery in New York coming in the spring of the fall with her Camel's Girth weavings. Some of these samples you saw in Jill's show spread out and pinned out, but we have recently started to frame them and try to really so other people can look at them more closely. Sometimes by creating the sort of these framed spaces, people look at them more closely. They don't run by them so quickly. We're trying to appeal to a larger mass, not just to the weavers who are looking at the work. Here's a detail of the previous piece. She had done boxes for us. Some of these, if you have any of our catalogs, you will see that I've displayed these in many different fashions, round, square. In fact, people complain, they look at my pictures and go, where's the piece? Because it doesn't look like how I showed it. But half the fun of this was the fun that I had, at least for me, in being able to photograph them in different ways. For instance, here's a more recent photograph of a piece that we had called the Blue Wave. We were very fortunate that Kay has given us some of her earlier pieces to start showing. In the 90s, there was a remarkable project, Marriage and Forum, that Signe Mayfield had curated at the Palo Alto Cultural Center, and where Bob would make a wood bowl and Kay would make a paper bowl, sometimes out of paper, sometimes out of hornet's nest. They were all different. It traveled from 93 through 96, and eventually the American Craft Museum and the Renwick and elsewhere. But then Kay and Bob made 6 sets for us, which we had in one of our exhibitions in Connecticut. This was the first of those 6 sets. This is my son's favorite part of Kay, is the way she collects and displays things in her studio. He couldn't get past it. And since then, these collections of shells that she collect with Kif Simmons and Dominic DeMare on trips to Hawaii from '89 to 2005, later became these collages. We have several of these. In fact, we've actually recently framed this one. This portrait was done in 2005. Actually, take that back, in the 90s. Take that back. When I
2005, she started making jewelry.
Yeah, well, in 2005, she started making this jewelry, which she had pinned on her wall and has always looked like necklaces, but I defy anyone to actually wear them. So we are in current taking this jewelry and we are framing them more like objects, which will be available in upcoming exhibitions here. And here she is doing card weaving in her studio. This was actually one of the necklaces before it ends up in the frame. It is currently at my framer, which I thought I'd have a picture by today, but my framer is not is about as not here. Let's put it that way. In the 90s, Kay adapted an origami technique for making boxes with a folded top that she learned from Ruth Asawa to create her Takabaka series, which she introduced in her 1999 exhibition, Bob Stocksdale, Kay Sekimachi Books, Boxes and Bowls, here at Brown Grotta, actually in our former smaller space. Here's another one of the boxes that she had made for the show. And here's a detail of another one. This is one of her favorite pictures that I took of one of her banners that she did in front of one of her baskets. That she liked the picture so much, she asked for the piece back, which I was frustrated about. Her split ply twine baskets, which sometimes sat on pedestals that Bob had woven, and I just thought they were more interesting by themselves. And the leaf baskets, which she began in the 90s and continued to 2000s, have become incredibly popular. I not only sold as many as she made at the time, I've sold resale of them. People just can't get enough of them. But love the translucent nature of them. But this is unusual for me to photograph them not in space, because we had done a catalog for an exhibition at the in Pennsylvania. We were showing art out of natural materials, and we try to make it look more like a museum show, which is not typical of ours, where usually I try to show the works in space. And what you saw in the original slide, she was actually weaving some of these pieces. In the 2000s, she created minimalist weavings inspired by Agnes Martin and Paul Klee. She's worked on these when we were visitor in 2014, and we love them so much we brought them back to Connecticut to find new homes. We've also been struck by how much well-deserved admiration Kay has garnered in the last few years. The Smithsonian has created an online comic that you see here. The San Francisco Museum of Art has done an online animation with Kay's narration. The Japanese American National Museum has included her in the design activity, emphasizing paper dolls that she made while her family was in internment camp during World War II. And in 2021, her story was included in Vogue, an article on Japanese American women from California who had been interned during World War II. And last year, the which I'm pronouncing poorly, Takabaka series was an inspiration for an exciting collaboration with Levevi, the Spanish leather goods manufacturer and supporter of the Levy Craft Prize. The bag on the left, you can actually open up, and I am told she can, I have not seen it yet, that she could actually fit inside it, which I would love to someday go back to and photograph her in it. Now trying to interview. anyways, in 2025, we were in discussion, I mentioned with this New York gallery for September, which would be her first New York solo exhibition in decades. There'll be more information on our website pretty soon. And this was very exciting to me. In 1991, I went to photograph her in her closet, and Kay always thought there was nothing good enough ever to come out of the closet, although that was only in her mind because everybody else completely disagreed with that concept. So back in 2014, I went back to re-photograph the same photograph that I loved so much in 1991. Again, stuff that was too good to be hidden in the closet was hidden in the closet. But in Kay's mind, nothing was ever good enough for everybody else because she was such a perfectionist in her work. But there's been such a buzz. We've had curators who've are coming out to trying to set up this week from the Whitney to visit her. I mean, we have actually several New York galleries that are fighting to try to get the few works that are available from her work. So there's a real buzz, which is quite frankly long overdue. Anyways, that's my many too many words. Thank you.
I don't think it was too many words, Tom. It was great to hear another perspective. And now, speaking of perspectives, we'd love to take some questions. And the first one is for Jill. If you're still here, and it's how can people get the brochure?
I did respond directly. You can email me at jdalessandro@denverartmuseum.org if you're interested. I would ask that it be footnoted, though. That information has been repurposed before without footnotes. So, I can't find the PDF, but I did take a photograph of it. So you were seeing photographs. So.
Well, that's cool and wonderful.
So there's digital copies. I don't think the hard copies still exist.
I feel like we had such a rich and comprehensive view of both of these amazing artists. It was really, really inspiring. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to you, Gyöngy, to Melissa, to Jill, and to Tom and Rhonda. Very wonderful sharing that you guys did.
I do apologize that I did find this morning great photographs of a very important thing to me, maybe not to everybody else. But when my wife was pregnant, we went to Napa Valley with Bob and Kay, and I was the designated driver since obviously Rhonda couldn't drink and Bob and Kay were kind of up there in age. So it was that part was a little depressing, but it was quite an interesting time because Bob and Kay got to introduce us to Marion Hildebrand and some of their other artist friends in Napa. And we got to look at wineries that were designed beautifully. But anyways, it was, I finally found the pictures this morning, but too late to include in the presentation.
And many of you have asked if this will be available. The recording will be available. We have a YouTube channel, which I'll put in the chat, and it'll be up there with the other sessions that we've done so that it can be, viewed again and enjoyed again. And it's at Welcome to Fiberworks on YouTube, but I will put it in the chat.
And by the way, if anyone is interested in more, there's publications of Kay's that are available on our website, from the Master Weaver book to catalogs that we've done. If people want to get more information about her, at browngrotta.com.
But Jill is correct. That brochure that she did is really beautiful. And we refer to it a lot, and we footnote it every time.
And we will be reinterpreting some of the ways those were displayed in some frame pieces in upcoming exhibitions.
Like I said, it was all Kay.
Well, it's an interesting thing, though. Artists get so close to the work, they don't always look at how other people see how it's presented. And so I'm very happy that Kay is comfortable enough to let us take that from her, and we're sort of those eyes of the viewer, and we're taking it away from how she so closely inspects that work to so other people can see that work in a different way. And I'm very, thrilled that she's given us that ability.
I want to just mention that Masako has put a pretty important comment, which I'm going to read in the chat. She says, FYI, the city of San Francisco is planning on destroying the Ruth Asawa Osaka Way Mall, which has the origami fountains. The fountains will be kept, but the rest of the block, which was her design, will be permanently altered instead of conserved. It should be a historic preservation project. Instead, please write. It will help if enough of the public is concerned to preserve and conserve the original design of the mall. So thank you very much, Masako. Ginge, do you want to make any kind of closing comments here? We're getting many thanks, and we are so appreciative that you all enjoyed it. Any comments from you, Ginge, or from Melissa?
Julie, I just have to say that what you're doing and what other people are helping you do, it's all volunteer. Makes my hair stand up to say it, because you are doing something so wonderful, bringing us together to have these conversations. And I know, Julie, you're trying very hard to organize this and make it all work smoothly. And I will help you as much as I can with the editing. But I feel as if I know both these artists so well, and yet, again, with your presentation and what you've made happen today, I feel as if I'm getting to know them in ways that I never had in the past. So, Julie, thank you very much. And to our participants for their presentations, excellent, wonderful, so thoughtful. Thank you.
Well, it is, of course, my pleasure. And we've had over 100 people here today. And it's a real testament to the community that you helped bring to life with Fiberworks. But what I really learned today is how much came before that too, with these two amazing women. And Melissa, anything that you'd like to say as we close out here? Or Jill, I want to give you the floor.
I don't really have anything to add to what's already been said, other than my thanks to add to Ginge's, to you for pulling this all together. It's really been a privilege to be a part of this group of speakers and to be able to talk about these wonderful artists. So thank you.
Jill, anything else? If you're still here, yes, I see you.
I'm still here. I'm still here. I don't just thank you. I think Melissa, everyone said it so beautifully, so I don't really need to say more, but it is a really special community. So I'm happy to be part of it, even though I moved away. We're the tentacles, we're just weaving in all different, and you're in Wisconsin. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that we can do it virtually, and people are asking again if this is going to be shared. It's going to be shared on our YouTube channel, which is at Welcome to Fiberworks, and we will send out announcements. We also have a Facebook group. If you would like to join that, welcome to number 2 Fiberworks. And in closing, I just want to say that we're going to have another one of these sessions. It will be on the Lausanne Biennale, which featured many Fiberworks artists, and we'll let you know when that's going to happen. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and it was very special, and we're going to keep going here. So
just one little thing I'd like to add. I noticed in the beginning there were 181 people signed on, and I was quite surprised and astounded and happy. But I must say that we have lost track of so many people from those early days. The documentation of Fiberworks kind of went all over the place. Much of it that I happen to have is in the Archives of American Art, and also all the brochures now are in the archives of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. But if you know people who are interested, if you know people who were in your classes or who you exhibited with or who are interested, please let us know. Thank you.
Everyone have a safe and wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for joining.